African governments are lagging behind in registering new births, and this, of course, has serious implications for the planning of health and other government services. Let's get a discussion going around this issue now. UNICEF's Regional Chief of Communications, James Elder, joins us now via our Skype line from Nairobi. James, thanks very much for your time this afternoon. It's, of course, quite an important issue across the continent, but can we just get some South African perspective on how our government fares in terms of birth registration?
Yeah, look, that's a good news story. South Africa is a leader. The high 90%. It's written into your law. More importantly than that, there's an enabling environment. South Africa has managed to find ways to link birth certificates with health centres and so on, so making it very easy for families to do it. I think the most recent numbers were there'd been a sort of a 2% increase, which again is good when you're already in the high 90s. So South Africa's story and the way that South Africa has managed to get birth certificates to children and the way that they've managed to explain just how critical they are is something that UNICEF and donors are trying to take across the continent.
So it's a good news story in South Africa, not so for the rest of the continent. In sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, I'm just looking at some of the information that your office has sent us. If the current trend persists, we'll see, I mean, this number is shocking, 115 million unregistered children by 2030, and that's not a long way off.
No, it's a crazy number, and of course, why does that number matter? It matters because, firstly, 115 million, each one of those is a child that's looking for a basic opportunity and a fair chance. But what a birth certificate is, it's not just some nice, piece of paper with a logo that we keep in a drawer. It is a child's membership card into society. It's what can guarantee that child an education and healthcare. It's what can tell a government when they're budgeting, this is how many children you've got. It's also what can keep a child safe in a time of so much migration and so on. When children don't have birth certificates, they're much more likely to be trafficked. They're much more likely to be used in child labour. So this is the very basics to start out a child. We know there's going to be a lot of challenges that kids face here and in other parts of the world. If they don't have this basic membership card to society, then they are way behind the eight ball before they even start to talk.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just about having this wonderful document. It's about ensuring that every child has a legal identity. What are the goals that governments on the continent are setting in terms of getting this under control?
Yeah, you're dead right. It's that legal identity. These kids are invisible otherwise, which is dangerous, and again, for the basics like quality healthcare. What governments are trying to do, and again, they're taking the model of South Africa. The European Union's been a great donor in this part of the world, trying to find things that work. And what we've found is that you join health systems with birth registration. So wherever a mum gives birth, that's where she gets a birth certificate. It doesn't sound too complicated because it's not. Don't make her come back a month later when she's got to leave other children and everything's much more difficult and she needs transport. Do it at that moment and digitise it. And when we do that, whether it's Uganda, Ethiopia, Mali, Senegal, we're seeing numbers literally double. And as you said there, Michelle, as well, with that 115 million, we need numbers to double because let's not forget the moment we are in at this point in the world. Sub-Saharan Africa is seeing population growth we've never seen before in human history. And that can be an incredibly good thing. If we get it right, we get birth certificates, quality education, then these young people, these kids will turn into young people, they'll get a decent job, they'll become members of society, we will see reductions in poverty that were never before possible. So this is not a story for just UNICEF, and it's not an earnest story. This is a story for governments, it's a story for the private sector. It's about that next generation. Because if we don't get it right, then the flip side is true. Not just reduction in poverty, the flip side is huge growth in unemployment, scarcity, insecurity, instability. These things are a reality, and we're not talking a long way away. We're talking in 10 years. So that's why today and learning from South Africa and so on are so important.
Yeah, and James, as you say, it'll result, if it's not dealt with and dealt with urgently, result in a generation, if not generations, of essentially invisible people.
Yeah, invisible people who are fodder to be taken advantage of, and invisible people who didn't get a chance to get a quality education, never therefore had the skills, were never going to have the skills to enter not just the workforce but a changing workforce. And we know what that looks like. We know that, young men need to be part of society and need to have that chance for a decent job. And we know that young women elevate so much in their families when they are given a quality education. These things all start with a birth certificate. Get that right and move into quality education and skills. And this is an amazing next 10, 15 years where we can reduce, poverty levels are still, 70% of people in sub-Saharan Africa are still on less than $2 a day. This next 10, 15 years is a once in a, not lifetime, it's a once in 100-year chance to really address that. But get it wrong and you've got tens of millions of young people who are completely disconnected from society.
Such an incredibly important story. Thanks very much for talking to us. UNICEF's Regional Chief of Communications, James Elder, joining us there via our Skype line. He's in Nairobi and he's talking to us about the importance of registering every child's birth. It's a good story to tell in South Africa. We're up in the high 90s when it comes to birth registrations, not so for the rest of the continent.